Up, do the honors, introduce these two players for the last time tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here on Daybreak for game number 3 between these two wonderful Protoss players. They are, of course, fighting it out for a spot in the £10,000 ESET UK Masters Grand Finals later on this March. This is their first round game, and the series is tied up 1-all. The red Protoss in the bottom left-hand position representing Axiom Esports, we have Crank. He will be facing off against the recently teamless blue Protoss in the top right-hand corner. An incredible talent from France. Let's see if he can pip Crank to the post. It is ToD.
Now, these two so far have shown that they are very comfortable in going for a variety of strategies. Therefore, it's all important to find out what is going to happen. But ToD with a proxy pylon... What is he going to do?
A very quick proxy pylon as well. That was, of course, his first pylon, and we've got a gateway going down at the natural expansion. Interesting that he chooses to put them in front of the mineral line as opposed to behind, because this means that it's going to be a lot easier for Crank to scout it when he sends the probe down. He might not scout it anyway, of course, if the probe simply moves directly to ToD's base, but he's going for it right now. Both gateways down. Let's see what happens.
This is going to be very tough. Crank has not sent his probe out yet. He doesn't seem to have any intention to do so at the moment. It's a proxy 2-gate. This is the sort of thing that if you don't know it's coming, you lose.
On double gas being taken by Crank as well, so he is completely oblivious to the fact that this is incoming right now. And this could actually send Crank crashing out of the tournament here. First Zealot already being chrono boosted by ToD. 14 versus 17 supply, but what's going to matter right now is the supply worth of Zealots when ToD decides to come crashing through into the main base.
So here comes ToD's probe. It's coming in. Everything looks fine. It's just Crank's going to sit there and go, scouting probe. That's good. Everything's fine as far as I know. So ToD just waiting at the moment. Knows he hasn't been scouted, but out comes Crank. And does he see it? Does he? No. He doesn't. Okay, so Crank is like, everything's cool. Everything's fine. I'm happy. I'm just getting my double gas, 3 workers in each, which limits everything. And the worst thing is Crank even skipping the Zealot.
Oh dear, skipping the Zealot is not going to be good news for him. The first 2 Zealots moving into Crank's base right now. Everything getting chrono boosted as his tournament life is on the line. And I think, wow, even the probe from ToD getting involved right now. 3rd Zealot joining in the fray. A Stalker being chrono boosted out right now from Crank, but there's just almost nothing he can do. Work has killed 3 and counting, so not a catastrophic amount just yet. But if that pylon goes down...
That was a smart move. Focusing that pylon was so clever. Crank's supply block, no power to his gateway. And I just don't think that there's anything Crank can do at the moment.
Oh, and there's the Mothership Core. Could this be his saving grace right now? The Zealots are finally going to get cleaned up. How many probes has Crank lost? And don't forget, he's lost 10 probes at the moment, and the amount of mining time there is being absolutely ridiculous as well. Back at home, ToD is making a forge by his ramp, so he will be able to get a cannon up to prevent some sort of counterattack from going on. The worker supply right now is 12 to 10, and bizarrely, we might actually get a reset into a normal game.
The trouble and my concern ultimately is just that ToD has committed so much to this. Yes, there's been some lost mining time, but that Mothership Core has cleaned it up. It's going to be tough for ToD to do any more damage at the moment. And as a result, he's got to get some tech behind this. He needs to get his Cyber Core up, or at least start getting prepared, because all the while he's only 3 workers ahead, which admittedly is about 30%, but still, it's definitely closer than ToD would like right now.
And ToD trying to get a couple more probe kills here with these Zealots. Managing to get 1, that's great. If he gets a second one, that's going to be serve as well. But Crank dancing his probes away very well. And the Mothership Core plus 2 Stalkers will put an end to that. So I think ToD really shouldn't be wasting additional resources and trying to get these Zealots in. They won't do too much damage. But in the meantime, Crank has a probe inside the main base of ToD now.
ToD did manage to kill just 2 more workers there, taking the total to 13. It does mean that ToD is 3 workers ahead still, but he's about to lose his pylon. He's about to lose those 2 gateways that he built outside his opponent's base. But ToD, he is putting a cannon at his front, ready to wall off, and things are actually surprisingly even at the moment, in my opinion.
This is This is a very bizarre opening so far. Of course, for those of you who are used to seeing unscouted 2 gates in Wings of Liberty, you might be thinking, well, this is GG. And for a while, you'd be forgiven for assuming that as well. It certainly looked that way for a bit. And then Crank bought enough time for his mothership core to pop out that between that and the first couple of Stalkers, despite having the first Zealot skipped, was able to hold that off. And now we're in a situation where it's 17 to 18 workers in ToD's favor, 23 to 22 supply, and on paper at least, the game seems quite even.
I'm still a little in shock, because I'm going to admit I didn't see the dynamic the Mothership Core were bringing into this exact situation. But my goodness, you couldn't... If you go back to Wings of Liberty, and you had an unscouted 2-gate, a proxy 2-gate, where your opponent skipped their Zealot, you could not be in a worse situation. But as we just saw, the Mothership Core dealt with it quite effectively. Crank now actually equal in workers, and all in all, this is anyone's game, and I just love that.
No, I think this is great. This is the first time I've seen a proxy 2-gate get held off by a Mothership Core, and I think it's probably the first time a lot of people in chat have seen it as well. This was really cool play coming from both players, and even if it, of course, some people will have seen it before and some people wouldn't have, but it's great to be able to check out these new strategies that the new game is bringing. This is the kind of stuff that we want to see from the first couple of HOTS tournaments, and these guys aren't disappointing.
So, we've got the Robo coming down for Crank at the moment. He's going to get the tech advantage pretty soon. He's also taking down his natural, but ToD going for the Stargate yet again. He's going for the same mid and late game build as we've seen in game 1 and 2. But is he going to be the aggressor? And is he going to be able to hold off what his opponent is no doubt going to start coming at him with very shortly? And also the economy Crank is going to get up and running with that natural base already half done.
Yeah, the natural is going to be a big sticking point here in this game. ToD does know about it, though. He's sacrificed a Zealot for that information right now at the natural expansion. That bites the dust, but in the meantime, the Mothership Core from Crank going to come and try and do a bit of harassment. The Stalker here from ToD going to say no. And has Crank seen the Stargate behind the mineral line? Yes, he has.
So that is good news for Crank. He knows what's coming. He's chucked down his Twilight Council at the same time. So maybe going for that Blink Stalker play that we saw in game 2. There's no chance that he'll go for DTs, and the reason we know that is because the cannons are down at the front and also in the mineral line, so they would be completely ineffective in any form. So really, unless he's going to go for some kind of Zealot Archon play, I'm saying it's going to be Blink with the Observer.
And Blink with the Observer isn't necessarily that bad a choice. We've seen situations already in this very series where Blink has been incredibly... Oh no. It looks like Crank is lagging out a little bit. Hopefully, we won't get a situation where he leaves the game.
That doesn't matter.
But if he does, it doesn't matter. That's right, Maddles. We've got resume from replay should that actually mark. So Crank unfortunately disconnected just now, but it is not going to matter. Apparently, Crank has replaced Crank, and ToD has replaced ToD, which means everything seems to be going quite well.
You could add in some very interesting things here, like, especially in practice, I don't know if you've actually played with this yet, but where you switch into the other person's shoes.
Yes, that'd be really cool. If you go to like a PvP, for example, imagine if this was in Wings of Liberty, where it's like, I want to try a Twilight build versus your Robo build, and you both just load up and like sort out the end of the openings, and then you stop. And you load from that replay and play both sides of it as practice. That'd be really, really cool. If I was a pro player, I'd love something like that.
I'm not a pro player, and I love that. It's great fun to do, so I think everyone should try it. Like, it's really...
Zesty Chef in chat summed up exactly what I thought of what I thought about this game. He said, WTF, I left like 5 minutes ago because I thought Crank lost. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Heart of the Swarm, where proxy 2 gates are effectively countered by Mothership Cores, and we have got a couple of Phoenixes moving into the natural expansion here of Crank, but that Nexus does have Photon Overcharge on it, will be chasing those Phoenixes out. Total number of workers killed this game so far, up to 18 from ToD after that proxy 2 gate, with only 1 from Crank. But the current worker supply is 36 to 31 in Crank's favor.
Which is not something you usually expect after a non-scouted 2-gate proxy, would you? It's definitely turned into probably one of the funkiest games I've seen in Heart of the Swarm so far. And then if it wasn't cool enough, we resume from replay as well after Crank drop. What we're really looking for now is actually, where can either of these players start to get ahead? We've got a lot of Stalkers moving across the map, and Blink just finished up.
All right, so we might see some aggressive blink play coming out of Crank here. Of course, you've seen it once before already this series. Will he be able to use it effectively, though? Those Phoenixes can lift 3 of the Stalkers, and with the Mothership Core and the Zealots to tank some damage as well, might be able to get a lot of damage done. But ToD, finishing up his first Immortal as well, should definitely be able to scare these Blink Stalkers away right now.
The Rock's getting taken down, just trying to make a bit more of an open bit of space, so pushing up through that choke isn't quite as damaging. Crank is definitely wanting to be the aggressor. The Phoenix moving forward, but do manage to get the sentry. That was a brave but very good move by ToD.
Yeah, that could end up being very, very useful for him in the coming engagement here. Crank obviously wanting to move forward. He has a grand total of 16 Stalkers versus the 4 of ToD, but ToD has got the Immortal in his army composition now as well, moving further back to Immortals. Good time warp, but just as Crank blinks out. So that would have been very, very useful. The Stalkers were still there. And Crank stops his aggression for now. ToD has got his natural up as well. Worker supplies are currently 38 to 35 as Crank considers going in for round number 2.
He's trying to chip away at those photon cannons. The Stalker count is absolutely huge, 19 to 5. But we have got a good lift from a couple of Phoenix. All of the action is going on right now, and Crank looks to be dropping supply quicker than his opponent.
Yeah, he didn't. He blinked in and targeted down the Immortals, which is great, but a third Immortal actually popped in the middle of that, and it wasn't targeted down at all. And also, on top of that, the Mothership Core was being hit by a couple of Stalkers, and it could have gotten taken out very early in the engagement, but Crank didn't focus it, and that's why it's still alive. Supplies dead even now, 72-73.
Photon cannons still trying to get up. That one Immortal is going to play such an important part for ToD at the moment. The second one nearly out. A couple of lifts going on those Stalkers. A time warp even being used there. Could have potentially been slightly further back, but for the moment ToD is defending this very well.
He is indeed, and this isn't any sort of all-in from Crank by any means. Both sides are on 2 bases right now, and Crank is trying to continuously pressure while adding to his probe count back home. He's actually up to 45 versus 39 probes at the moment, so ToD needs to try and continuously produce a couple more of those. But with these Immortals in his army composition, he should be okay.
Those Immortals are just so important. The Photon Cannons are going to help as well. And the reason those Photon Cannons are important is because it stops Crank from just blinking straight on top of the Immortals to try and snipe them out. But of course, they are starting to fall. It's going to be a tough hold the longer Crank keeps this up. And he's just warping in wave after wave of Stalkers.
Yeah, Crank really wants to end the game with these Stalkers. The problem is ToD is continuously producing Immortals right now. Look at the production tab. Crank is producing nothing but Stalkers right now. He's investing an awful lot into this. The problem is ToD is holding very strong with those Immortals, and Crank doesn't have a counter to it right now. And there we go, moving back into pro production. He's currently supply blocked on 84, but it looks like he might be scouting out to take his third base.
Now, the one thing I want to note is just how well ToD defended that. He's actually lost 1,000 less resources than Crank. He's still pretty much on equal workers. There's 2 more for Crank at 45 to the 43 of ToD. But with these now 4 Immortals, soon to be 5, ToD can get very aggressive very quickly now.
Yeah, he definitely can, and that's exactly what he's doing. Moving out across the map, the Observer from Crank spots the army of ToD moving in right now. Hallucinated Phoenix just going to be checking out the army as well as the infrastructure that Crank has in his main base, and ToD is looking very, very scary. Crank has a robotics bay about to complete, but it won't complete in time to defend against these Immortals if ToD chooses to attack now.
This is going to be tense. ToD moving back though. He doesn't want to go for it quite at the moment, and the trouble is the robotics bay has just finished up. Extended thermal lance literally just started now for Crank, and that means the Colossi will be out slightly sooner. But yeah, this is still looking very level. These two are giving us such a good show.
Now, the first third base is being taken from ToD, so we can see what his plan was. He was out in the middle of the map, and it looked like he might have been able to do a lot of damage if those Immortals decided to pop into the natural. But instead of trying to end the game like that, he's opted instead to take a significantly earlier third base. Crank is going to try and put his third down as well, but this leaves a possible opportunity for ToD to go in and see if he can deny it. And with these Immortals still in the army composition, I mean, there's a total of 6 of them now, and Crank still not rallying Colossi to his army, I actually think ToD could deny this third base from Crank.
This is going to be tough. The Stalker's coming in though, so maybe ToD is going to get his own third. Denied. This is going to be very close. There's nothing there. ToD not moving down, Jorasar.
And I think, is this going to end up being a cancel? The shields are almost all gone now. These Stalkers are desperately going to want that Nexus cancelled. If he does that, he's going to be feeling very happy indeed. And yes, he actually blinks back at the very last second. The Nexus might have survived, but ToD not taking any chances and immediately cancelling. So now ToD is going to have to go for some counter-aggression against Crank's third, I feel, to maintain his position in this game.
That blink back, sniping off that Nexus, forcing the cancel, was precisely what Crank needed to do. But my concern is still the fact that there are 6 Immortals out for ToD compared to just the 2 for Crank. But once that Colossi count starts getting higher, well, it's going to end up into the late game of Colossi v Colossi. And then you end up in a situation where actually things get very, very even.
That's right. We're going to see potentially a War of the Worlds scenario here, where laser beams basically dance across all of our screens. Colossi production has, of course, started on both sides. We've got 2 versus 2 Colossi at the moment. Significantly more Immortals for ToD, but as more and more Colossi gets mixed in here, unless you can drop the Immortals directly on top where they do maximum damage, they're going to become a lot less relevant because their range just isn't there.
Well, we do now have ToD trying to take the double expand, and I think that is the best option for him. I believe, if I look at his vision, he does know that his opponent's Nexus at the third is up and running.
Oh, yeah,
And as a result, he has to double expand after losing his third, because otherwise he's going to fall behind very quickly in terms of the economy. But it's a risk, and Crank could try and punish that.
Now, ToD, interestingly, has not gotten any observers this game, something I really want to highlight here, because Crank's observers have been in really, really good places. We can see outside the 4th base of ToD where the army is, just allowing Crank to get a tremendous amount of vision of where the army is and therefore not have to worry too much about having his Blink Stalkers out of position. ToD, on the other hand, hasn't done any of this at all. Yes, he's getting more tech up and he's getting some Archons up as well, so his standing army is pretty scary, but he's not doing anything with it yet.
Now, the thing which I really want to pick up on is, exactly as you say, ToD's not doing anything with his army, but the reason for that is he's getting double Colossi production compared to the single Colossus at a time out of Crank, and therefore he will get a much more powerful ground army up quite quickly. There's also the Archon out for ToD at the moment, which only one Archon won't make a huge difference, but just look at the Immortal count, the Colossi count, all the power units of the army are all siding in ToD's favor.
Yeah, I think the main thing is still going to be the Colossi here, where ToD actually is 5 compared to the 4 of Crank, which is a great thing. He's going to be very pleased with that, because bear in mind, imagine if Crank had 3 or 4 more Colossi than ToD. Yes, Immortals do great against Colossi, and yes, Archons do tremendous amounts of splash damage, but the range after extended Thermal Lance means that Crank can effectively kite the army backwards a little. But even right now, with the Colossus count actually in ToD's favor as well, that can't actually happen for Crank.
And I'm just a bit surprised, actually, that ToD hasn't started Extended Thermal Lance yet. I was expecting to see it shortly, and I don't know if he's just made a mistake, he hasn't realised that he doesn't have it yet, but that could be a bit of a pain for him, because his army isn't so overpowering that it'll work, and we see Crank even doing a little bit of damage with these Stalkers to the third.
Yep, a couple of Stalkers being walked in to try and do some harassment damage at the 3rd base, blinking out as soon as the Time Warp is seen. He knows that ToD is committing some of his army to that. Crank, though, has been macroing like an absolute beast behind this. He's taken his own 4th base as well towards the center of the map. His work supply is currently up 64 to 62, and his overall supply, he's going to max out slightly sooner than ToD at this rate, although a couple of Stalkers just died to make me a liar.
So, looking at the units, looking at the actual army, one of the biggest difference is Crank has an awful lot of supply taken up with Zealots. That's going to allow him to tank up quite a large sum of damage, but that means that he's got less Colossi, less Immortals, and, well, he does now have more Archons, but before he had less Archons. So these two armies are slightly different, but it's going to be tough to see who's going to come out on top.
Yeah, the problem with Zealots at this stage of the game, let me just double check if either player has charge. So ToD does not have charge, but Crank does. Okay, that's going to be very useful, because the more Colossi you have out, Zealots simply become how many Colossi hits can they actually survive. And you get to a point where Zealots are effectively being fried with one hit, all that supply that Crank has in Zealots wouldn't be useful anymore. So it comes down to how quickly ToD can get rid of them before they actually charge up to the army. And here we go. It looks like they need to middle map. Time Warp coming in from both players, slowing the armies down, and ToD trying to micro back now with these Colossi. The Zealots actually doing a lot of damage to the Immortals in behind. Come on, ToD. He needs to try and get rid of these Zealots, and he's doing that right now, but the Archons are coming in from Crank.
He didn't want to take the engagement, and that retreat, the damage he took on that retreat has put him quite a long way behind in terms of the supply. The fourth base for ToD almost certain to fall at this moment.
It was the slightest overextension from ToD, really, really slight, and that Time Warp really punished him for it. He's down to 158 supply versus 180 right now. All the Zealots are gone though, and ToD is looking like he does actually want to engage right now. He has a good spread on his Colossi, but then the Colossus count from Crank is simply too great, and he loses the rest of it as well. 152 to 81 supply, and ToD is looking like he will not be able to progress past this stage of the tournament.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you, Jorisar. It is now double the supply for Crank compared to ToD. Crank has his fourth base up. He has 6 Colossi v just the 2 of ToD at the moment. The third base about to fall, but ToD, he is going to fight till the bitter end. His tournament depends on it. And yeah, ToD, he apparently has no clue why he donated 2 games.
And unfortunately, ToD is going to go out at this stage, obviously not particularly happy with how this tournament has progressed. Good luck in the tournament from ToD. GG's, and Crank, ladies and gentlemen, is going to advance in a very closely contested 2-1